John Caldwell is an Australian anti-bullying advocate. He's also Retail World Resourcing CEO. They're a placement company or a recruitment company. He's also a best-selling author of his book Full Throttle, and he's a nominee for Australian of the Year for 2014 in Victoria. There's some credentials there. John, nice to talk with you.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me on the program.
It's a pleasure. Now, tell me about your experience with bullying and why you're such an outspoken advocate of the no bullying principle, which we all believe in, but you have some very special reasons as to why you're doing this.
Yeah, well, growing up, I was bullied, and bullying covers the whole spectrum, and I copped all of it. So I was bullied at school, bullied at home, and in later life I was bullied when I first joined the workforce as well. So I sort of copped it from all angles, which is why now I like to, stand up and speak out when I couldn't when I was younger.
John, how do you define bullying?
Bullying ultimately is when someone uses superior strength or influence to intimidate someone else. So in terms of, to break that down, I think it could be anything from manipulation, intimidation, exclusion, humiliation, and things like that. And then, of course, the worst things such as sexual abuse as well come under it.
Yeah. Can I ask you to cast your mind back? And I think you were in a home, and you suggest in the information I have in front of me, you suggest that throughout your life, I think you were in foster homes, were you not?
Yeah, just after my father died, so from the age of sort of 12 onwards, I was in foster homes for a while. But I guess the bullying happened before that in my secure, if you like, home with my actual parents was probably worse though. And
was that at the hands of your dad or your mum or both?
It was just after my dad died, my stepfather. My mother moved on nice and quickly, and my stepfather was very much a bully. Didn't really understand how to have children, and operated on the children should be seen and not heard principle. But probably took it to a bit of an extreme, really.
And was your form of bullying verbal, or was it more physical?
It was verbal, always verbal, and I think, there was withheld food sometimes and things like that. So it was really just, he liked to I guess, treat the children like they were animals at times. So, but the school bullying was probably the most painful and the children the most hurtful in my experience.
And tell me a little about that. I understand where you're coming from. I have kids, and a couple of my kids have experienced bullying at school, maybe not to your extent.
I think my family gave them a lot of ammunition, so we were very poor. So I was often the only kid in the schools without the uniform, sometimes without shoes, and we travelled a lot. So every sort of 3 months I'd change schools. So I was always the new kid. And when you're the only one without a uniform, you can't sneak into the background. You're pretty prominent there. So there was lots of reasons. I was also bullied from a really young age for being gay before I even knew what that meant.
Yes.
I was singled out for that. So often it's any point of difference that the children don't understand that they'll pick on you for that. So.
Well, yeah, you're right. And your school kids in the schoolyard can be a horrendous spot, can't it?
It can be, and I talk about it in my book that although I experienced some terrible stuff at home, it was only at the school stuff that really ever pushed me to the brink of thinking I didn't want to put up with it anymore. And they can be very cruel, and I don't think they have any boundaries of how far they'll go. My father actually, when I was 11, committed suicide, and I was present. And believe it or not, that turned into something to get bullied for at school. So, they would say, obviously, things like it was my fault that had happened. So they really will pick up on anything and be as hurtful as they possibly can.
So were you, when you say at school, you did travel around a lot, which makes it difficult in securing good friends at school because you need to be there a bit of time for that. Also, I don't know when you grew up, but were there groups at school that you had to be a part of?
There was then and there is now, and I was never fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to be part of any of those groups. I was very much a loner, and I think that's what happens when you start to get bullied. You stop making an effort and you retreat, and you just try and stick to yourself a lot. But then you don't have anyone to talk to or confide in about how you're feeling, so that becomes an issue for children as well.
Yes, yeah, a good point. Because at school it can be many forms of bullying. Was yours, you mentioned one form, you were being accused of certain things, but was there name calling or was it exclusion?
It was both. Name calling it can be one of the most hurtful as well. I think having said we were poor, my nickname at school was Jono the Busho, And I think it sounds quite funny now, but back then it was absolutely horrendous to be targeted with that label. But definitely, physical luckily wasn't too bad, but the name calling and the exclusion, and when you literally are the only kid in the school who has no one to talk to, I can understand why kids these days who are in that situation think, well, what's the point? What am I doing here? So.
Well, were you able to talk to any one of your parents at this stage, or was that just, your stepdad or your mum?
My family, there was a lot of alcohol, and it was a very dysfunctional family. And I wouldn't like to say that they didn't care, but they weren't robust parents. So you just didn't talk about feelings or what was happening. I think, and not just my case, but a lot of what we hear these days is that, more importantly, that children don't want to embarrass their parents, or they don't want to be embarrassed to tell their parents what's going on. So sometimes parents are the last people that get confided in about these issues.
John Caldwell is my special guest. He's an anti-bullying advocate. He's also CEO of his own company, Retail World Resourcing, and he's a best-selling author of his book, Full Throttle, which we'll find out about in just a moment. Now, you move into the workplace, and you said you copped more there. Was that because of your size? Was it because you didn't have much money? What was the issue there?
I think the gay thing happened again, but it was also coming from where I come from. I was very determined to work hard and get ahead. So I think I was targeted by some of the younger people at work who wanted to come in, flop around, not do much, and I was showing them up, so they really didn't like that. So it was you were sort of targeted to take a back step and shut up a little bit by them. And what I will say about that is it was probably only in my first job that happened, and what I've discovered later in life is that all of the things that I used to get teased for, that people didn't understand, have become qualities that really got embraced in the workforce and that people actually liked about me later on in life.
Now, well, that's a very good point, and I think as difficult as it must have been, some of that treatment you got at school probably toughened you up and made you a little streetwise for life after school.
Definitely toughened me up, and I think I have to attribute a lot of where I've come from and where I've gone to the strength I got from there. Unfortunately, and the reason I'm such an advocate for this is the statistics. There's so many that don't make it through and that aren't toughening up from it. And we need to put a stop to that.
Yeah, you're right. You mentioned that you also copped bullying because of your sexuality. Is that? Do you think that's being more accepted now, or is that still happening in the workplace?
I think it's definitely still happening. I do think it's a little more accepted in the workplace. It's certainly not more accepted in the schoolyard, though, and that's where the sexuality teasing is still very prominent, is at school.
Yeah, I don't want to relate the exact situation, but I heard of a situation with some folk who are in a town in Queensland, and they're copping exactly what you have copped in terms of bullying because of their sexuality, and I do want to do a story on it, but I'm just horrified in this day and age that sort of thing is going on our doorstep in 2013. I'm honestly amazed.
I am too, and some of the stories that we hear from schoolyards around the world, the things that children are teased for, it's hard to believe that people are still this ignorant, and that is why I'm doing what I'm doing and spending as much time raising awareness that this is not the goal, and that these people are not alone, and that it does get better later in life.
What would be your advice to people listening to the program tonight who maybe have a grandchild or a child, or somebody who is listening firsthand who is at school and either copping it at home, I'd like to think less at home, but maybe copping it at school?
The main advice I give people, and I don't give specific advice because every case is really different. But
just generally speaking.
Yeah, well, we have a website, angelsgold.org.au.
A bit slower, angelsgold.org.au.
GOAL.org.au.
Yes.
There's a range of tools on there. So there's things about the laws that you can use to protect you. There's links to psychologists. There's the things you need to do if you are going to proceed and try and have someone charged for this. Tips and hints on all of that, for all types as well, whether it's workplace or school. So angelsgold.org.au is a fantastic resource for people to use. But overall, I think that what I would say to children particularly is that they need to speak up to their parents, and that's the hardest thing. And parents, if you're sensing something is wrong, keep asking until you get a breakthrough. I think, we're just turning a blind eye to it too much, and it's quite horrific. We've got statistics to say that up to 49% of young people under 25 have considered suicide. So that's remarkable. That's nearly half of our children are thinking about this sort of thing.
Yeah, a bit of a sad reflection on our society in 2013, John. John Caldwell is my special guest. We're going to take a break and come back and talk more with John in just one moment. This is Good Relations. My name is John Scott. It's News Talk 4BC.